How are you thinking about this impact from fiscal? Are people figuring out how to track it? It seems like the lag from that getting into the real economy is really tricky.
Yeah, I think fiscal policy has is always a bit of a challenge because you have to track how all the money flows, and important to recognize the delays that exist in fiscal policy. I always like to talk about after the financial crisis, there was a Reinvestment Act. They kept working on a road by my house for 10 years. 10 years after.
You don't live in Boston. It wasn't the big dig, was it?
Right. The big dig went on for 15 years, 20 years. But that gives you a sense of these things is that the timing matters. And so as an example, there was with the Infrastructure Act, the money was allocated, the bonds were borrowed, right? The bonds were issued to finance that, but it's going to take a while for that to actually flow through the real economy. And so that elevated economic activity associated with a number of those programs is actually likely to peak here in 24. It picked up a lot, somewhat in 22, a lot in 23, but is actually going to go even further here in 24. So from a growth perspective, there's a lot of that stimulus that's coming from those sort of structural fiscal stories it's still in the pipeline, which is very interesting because essentially what we've done is we've engaged in a big fiscal stimulation at a time when the unemployment rate's at secular lows. And part of the story of why it's taking so long is that a lot of state and local governments who are actually implementing the infrastructure, they're the ones who build the roads. The federal government doesn't mostly build the roads, the state and local governments do. They actually are struggling to find the people, to hire them, to build the roads because the employment situation's so tight.
Right, which may not be the worst thing in the world. If this thing is stretched out appropriately, plus, if you taketh, you can, or you giveth, you can taketh away too. We can't forget that. So it's tricky. It's tricky to figure out how all of that drifts down. And, for those of you sitting outside the US, this is, as Bob pointed out, from federal to state to local to municipal, getting it out there. I mean, it's a long process. The government doesn't move quickly. So in a good scenario, Bob, it kind of lays support underneath the economy. In a bad situation, it's like gasoline on something that's too hot already.
Right.
And you've got to try to figure that out. And nobody seems to really know the answer to that, including the Fed, which is why these projections, everybody's kind of doing it on the back of the envelope.